George Gurdjieff was observing his students at the Prior when he made a discovery that would forever change our understanding of human nature. What he saw in that moment was so disturbing that he decided to dedicate decades of his life to teaching us an impossible-to-ignore truth. You are not who you think you are. On that day in 1922, as he walked through the gardens of his institute in France, Gurdjieff noticed something humanity had ignored for millennia. Every person around him, including himself, was an unconscious puppet, dancing to the rhythm of invisible forces that controlled every thought, every decision, every reaction. But what shocked him even more was this: those forces didn't come from outside. They were inside us. And the most powerful of all was what we consider most intimate and personal: our emotions. Man is a machine, Gurdjieff told his students, and his emotions are the wires that control it. Today, you're going to discover why your emotions are not your friends. Why they are not authentic expressions of who you really are. And why, until you deeply understand this, you will remain an unconscious prisoner of forces you don't even recognize. This isn't just another psychological theory. It's the result of decades of direct observation of human nature by one of the most revolutionary teachers who ever lived. And what you're about to hear may completely destroy the image you have of yourself. Get ready. Because once you see the truth about your emotions, there's no turning back. To understand the revolution Gurdjieff brought to our understanding of emotions, we need to return to his youth in the Caucasus. It was there, still a teenager, that he made his first devastating observation about human nature. Gurdjieff was watching a fight between two neighbors in his hometown. The men shouted, gestured violently, their faces red with anger. Within minutes, they went from close friends to mortal enemies. But then, something extraordinary happened. A child nearby got hurt. Instantly, both men transformed. The anger vanished like smoke. They ran together to help the child, working side by side as if they had never fought. In that moment, young Gurdjieff realized something that would change his life. Those men weren't controlling their emotions were controlling them. For years, Gurdjieff observed the same people in different situations. The pious man on Sunday became cruel on Monday. The loving mother in the morning turned into a witch by afternoon. The loyal friend of today became the traitor of tomorrow. Where was the real man? Gurdjieff asked himself. Who was each person really, when all these emotions kept possessing them? Then he made a connection that modern psychology still struggles to accept. We don't have emotions, emotions have us. Each emotional state is like a little tyrant that takes total control of our consciousness, making us believe we are that emotion. When you're angry, you don't think, I'm experiencing anger. You think, I am an angry person. The emotion becomes your full identity in that moment. Gurdjieff began to see human life as a succession of small emotional possessions. Each day, each hour, different emotions took over, and the person sincerely believed each of those emotions was themselves. Man has no unified I, Gurdjieff concluded. He has thousands of little I's, each commanded by a different emotion. This discovery was so radical that it would take decades for Gurdjieff to develop practical methods to deal with it. Because once you recognize you're not in control of your emotions, the most frightening question arises: who is really in charge of your life? In 1912, Gurdjieff arrived in St. Petersburg and began working with his first European students. What he created wasn't a traditional school, but a living laboratory to study the mechanics of human emotions. Ouspensky, who would become one of his main chroniclers, described his first experience with Gurdjieff's methods as terrifying. Not because they were physically dangerous, but because they revealed a truth about his own nature he preferred not to know. Gurdjieff developed specific exercises to show his students how little control they had over their emotions. One of the most famous was the non-expression of negative emotions exercise. For 1 week, Gurdjieff instructed, you must not express any negative emotion. No irritation, no impatience, no criticism. Just observe. Within hours, most people discovered something shocking. They spent most of the day in some form of negative emotional state, and were completely unaware of it. I didn't realize, one student wrote in her journal, that I spent the whole day slightly irritated by everything. The temperature of the tea, the street noise, the expression on people's faces. It was like I was a machine producing irritation, running automatically. But Gurdjieff went further. He showed that even our positive emotions followed mechanical patterns. Love quickly turned into possession. Compassion turned into moral superiority. Joy turned into destructive euphoria. Your emotions are not yours, Gurdjieff explained. They are automatic reactions programmed into you by life, by society, by your parents, by your experiences. He discovered that the so-called lower emotional center operated independently of our conscious will, responding to external stimuli like a sophisticated machine. And he showed that most of the important decisions in our lives are made by this lower emotional center, not by our rational mind. You think you choose, Gurdjieff said, but in truth, your emotions choose for you. In the winter of 1915, Gurdjieff gathered his most advanced students for an experiment that would forever change their understanding of emotions. He taught a specific technique of divided self-observation. You must become two people, he said. One who experiences the emotion, and another who observes the first experiencing the emotion. Without judgment, without trying to change. Just observing. Madame Ouspensky described her experience. I saw exactly the moment irritation entered me. It was like watching someone being possessed. In seconds, I was no longer the same person. Gurdjieff explained that each emotion functions like a program that hijacks our inner operating system. The emotion creates an entirely different reality. You are not a unique individual, he said. You are a specific type of emotional machine. I can predict your emotional reactions with the same precision an engineer predicts a machine's behavior. Your emotions are not proof that you are alive, he taught. They are proof that you are asleep. A truly conscious person is not possessed by emotions. She uses them as tools. During the experiments, Gurdjieff identified the primary negative emotions: anger, fear, sadness, envy, wounded pride, self-pity. Emotions that drain our psychic energy and keep us trapped. In 1922, at the Prier, Gurdjieff revealed something he had discovered in the East: the existence of a higher emotional center. An emotional capacity that is not reactive, not mechanical, and arises from awareness. The lower emotional center produces emotions about situations, he explained. The higher emotional center produces states of being that transcend any situation. During a typical emotional situation, students were to recognize the mechanical emotion, not identify with it, and consciously generate a higher emotion. Catherine Mansfield described her experience. For the first time in my life, I was not a victim of my feelings, I was their conscious creator. The higher emotional center operates exclusively in the present. It loves the essential being of the other person, regardless of anything they do or don't do. Gurdjieff also taught how to transform anger into active compassion. Anger and compassion are made from the same energy, he said. The difference is the direction you give that energy. In his final years, Gurdjieff developed the method of conscious emotional alchemy. First, separate the pure energy of the emotion. Second, purify it with conscious attention. Third, transmute it consciously into the desired emotional state. There are no negative emotions, he said. There are only misdirected energies. The key was to develop emotional will, the ability to consciously generate any emotional state necessary. If the situation calls for compassion, you can generate compassion. If it calls for firmness, you can generate firmness. If it calls for serenity, you can generate serenity. You become the master of your emotional life. Today, more than 75 years after his death, Gurdjieff's vision is more urgent than ever. We live in an era of emotional overload. And science confirms, most of our decisions are made by unconscious emotional centers. But he left us a clear map. Recognize that you are not your emotions. Observe your reactions without judgment. Practice non-identification. Cultivate the higher emotional center. And develop emotional will. An awakened person is not controlled by their emotions, Gurdjieff taught. They use them as a musician uses their instrument, consciously, intentionally, creatively. This is Gurdjieff's invitation. Stop being a victim of your emotional states and become an artist of your inner experience. The journey is challenging, but the reward is extraordinary: to live as a truly free human being. Man can awaken, he said, but he must want to awaken. And to want to awaken means to be willing to see that he is asleep. The choice, as always, is yours.